Frodo Baggins was a hobbit from the Shire. His parents were Drogo Baggins and Primula Brandybuck. He was their only son. When Frodo was young, he was adopted by his cousin Bilbo after the death of his parents. The year that Bilbo celebrated his 111st birthday, he disappeared and went to Rivendell, leaving Bag-End and his magic ring to Frodo. After many years, Gandalf paid Frodo a visit and told the hobbit of the nature of the ring that had been entrusted to him by Bilbo.
"The time has come to speak. Give me the ring for a moment."
Frodo took it from his breeches pocket, where it was clasped to a chain that hung from his belt. He unfastened it and handed it slowly to the wizard. It felt suddenly very heavy, as if either it or Frodo himself was in some way reluctant for Gandalf to touch it. Gandalf held it up. It looked to be made of pure and solid gold.
"Can you see any markings on it?"
he asked.
"No,"
said Frodo.
"there are none. It is quite plain, and it never shows a scratch or sign of wear."
"Well then, look."
To Frodo's astonishment and distress, the wizard threw it suddenly into the middle of a glowing corner of the fire. Frodo gave a cry and groped for the tongs, but Gandalf held him back.
"Wait,"
he said in a commanding voice, giving Frodo a quick look from under his bristling brows. No apparent change came over the ring. The wizard stood looking at the fire. Then he stooped and removed the ring to the hearth with the tongs, and at once picked it up. Frodo gasped.
"It is quite cool,"
said Gandalf.
"Take it."
Frodo received it. He now saw fine lines, finer than the finest pinstrokes, running along the ring, outside and inside. Lines of fire that seemed to form the letters of a flowing script. They shone piercingly bright, and yet remote, as if out of a great depth.
"I cannot read the fiery letters,"
said Frodo in a quavering voice.
"No,"
said Gandalf.
"but I can. The letters are Elvish, of an ancient mode, but the language is that of Mordor, which I will not utter here. But this in the common tongue is what it said close enough. One ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them."
During the conversation, Frodo's gardener, Samwise Gamgee, was caught eavesdropping. At the behest of Gandalf, Sam accompanied Frodo on his journey to Rivendell. Thus began a quest that would forever change their lives.
Once the hobbits met Strider and Bree, the group made their way to the abandoned ruins of the ancient watchtower Amonsul, also known as Weathertop. There, a dreadful occurrence took place that almost claimed Frodo's life. The Lord of the Nazgul stabbed him with a Morgul knife, an evil blade of dark sorcery. Immediately, though everything else remained as before, dim and dark, the shapes became terribly clear. He was able to see beneath their black wrappings. There were 5 tall figures, 2 standing on the lip of the dell, 3 advancing. In their white faces burned keen and merciless eyes. Under their mantles were long gray robes. Upon their gray hairs were helms of silver. In their haggard hands were swords of steel. Their eyes fell on him and pierced him, and they rushed towards him. Desperate, he drew his own sword, and it seemed to him that it flickered red, as if it was a firebrand. 2 of the figures halted. The third was taller than the others. His hair was long and gleaming, and on his helm was a crown. In one hand, he held a long sword, and in the other, a knife. Both the knife and the hand that held it glowed with a pale light. He sprang forward and bore down on Frodo. At that moment, Frodo threw himself forward on the ground, and he heard himself crying aloud,
"O Elbereth, Gilthonian!"
and he felt a pain like a dart of poisoned ice pierce his left shoulder. Frodo, dropping his sword, slipped the ring from his finger and closed his right hand tight upon it.
This stabbing would leave a lasting scar both physically and spiritually for Frodo. With the aid of the elven warrior Glorfindel, Frodo safely made it to Rivendell, where Lord Elrond mended his wound. While in Rivendell, Frodo attended the Council of Elrond, where he volunteered to take the ring to Mordor.
An overwhelming longing to rest and remain at peace by Bilbo's side in Rivendell filled all his heart. At last, with an effort he spoke, and wondered to hear his own words, as if some other will was using his small voice.
"I will take the ring,"
he said,
"though I do not know the way."
The Fellowship of the Ring was formed, and the company of 9 set out on the greatest quest of their lives that would hold the fate of Middle-earth. After the breaking of the Fellowship at Parth Galen, only Sam continued on the journey to Mordor with Frodo. Soon after this, Gollum made himself known to the two hobbits and led them into the dark land of Sauron. On their way into Mordor, they passed through the lair of the giant spider Shelob. The spider trapped Frodo and paralyzed him with her venom. The brave Sam rose to the occasion and blinded Shelob, using both the file given to Frodo by Galadriel and Sting, the elven blade given to Frodo by Bilbo. Sam then rescued Frodo from the Tower of Cirith Ungol.
The two hobbits were finally on the last leg of the journey, and trudged their way across the plains of Mordor and up the slopes of Mount Doom. Once inside the mountain, Frodo was overcome by the ring's power, and decided to keep it for himself instead of casting it into the flames. At this moment, Gollum reappeared and bit Frodo's finger off. In the scuffle, as fate would have it, Gollum tripped over the side of the ledge and plummeted to his death. In the process, the ring was destroyed, and the very fire that had created it. So ended the terror of Sauron, the Lord of the Rings.
Following his quest to Mordor, Frodo returned to the Shire and served as mayor for a time. He documented the events of the War of the Ring in the Red Book of Westmarch. Although he had completed one of the greatest journeys in the history of Middle-earth, Frodo was greatly weary in his latter years, and never fully healed from the stabbing at Weathertop and the poisoning he had endured by Shelob. He joined the last riding of the Keepers of the Rings over sea to the Undying Lands, and left all of his belongings, including the Red Book and Bag End, to his companion Sam. Frodo was one of the most important characters in the history of Middle-earth. He was the key player in the quest to take the One Ring back to Mordor to see it destroyed. His selfless spirit and determination got the ring to Mount Doom, where it was inevitably unmade. Professor Tolkien made Frodo the everyman, a character anyone could relate to, and because of this, Frodo is one of the most endearing protagonists in the history of literature. Thank you to Yoystan from Men of the West for voicing Frodo in this video, as well as being a guest narrator. Thanks for watching, and if you love Professor Tolkien's Middle-earth like myself, then please subscribe for more epic lore. This has been your pal, the Memory Troll. Cheers.